Richard III, The Wars of the Roses is a two-player Columbia block wargame about the conflict between the House of Lancaster and York during the 15th century. It does have some similarities to the game Hammer of the Scots, a game I very much enjoyed playing. However, Richard III brings some innovative new rules to reflect the Wars of the Roses. So they have some similarities, yes, but they certainly play very differently. During the game, the two houses will fight for the support of nobles and attempt to eliminate the enemy loyalists who refuse to support their side. So with no further delay, let's have a brief overview of the game, Richard III.
The map of Richard III is a map of England and Wales during the 15th century. Richard III is played over 3 campaigns, and each campaign is divided into 7 turns. At the start of a campaign, players will be dealt 7 cards. They will then select and play one of these cards on each turn. Every card in the game has a number printed on it. This number indicates how many action points that player has available to them when the card is played. Action points can be used to do several things. They can be used to activate a group of blocks together in an area to move, in which case the active player may move the chosen blocks up to 2 areas away from their current location. As a note, the blocks once activated do not have to move as a group. They can part their separate ways if you want them to. Action points can also be used to recruit new blocks from the player's draw pool. If a player chooses to do this, they simply take a block of their choosing from the pool and deploy it on the map in the appropriate area. They can deploy 1 block for each action point, and most blocks in the game have certain areas they must be recruited to. A player can also use action points to move blocks by sea movement, meaning the blocks can move from coastal areas to other coastal areas in a single move. However, in most cases it costs 1 action point for each individual block moved in this way, so it can really soak up those useful action points. Each card's action points can be used to do a combination of these actions. Not all action points from a single card have to be allocated to one of the actions I just mentioned. Battles are initiated in Richard III when a block or a group of blocks moves into an area the opposing force occupies. To understand the battles, we'll first have a quick look at the blocks themselves, as each block have some statistics printed on them that come into effect during the battles. Here we have the Lancastrian noble Clifford. He is an A2 and currently at strength 3. The A2 means that he will strike in the first round of combat, which is indicated by the letter A. All A blocks will strike before all B blocks get a chance to, and all B blocks before all C blocks, and so on. The number next to the A is the maximum result that is needed on a D6 to successfully wound an opponent's block. So the noble Clifford would hit an enemy block on any results of a 1 or 2. The pips here indicate the block's current strength. The noble Clifford is currently at strength 3. A block's strength indicates how many dice they get to roll in battle. So he will roll 3d6, hoping for any results of 1s or 2s. Quite a simple system. If the noble Clifford takes a hit himself, his strength will be reduced. The player then rotates the block anti-clockwise to represent the block's reduction in strength. This obviously means that the block becomes less efficient in battle, because his strength is now at only 2. When a block runs out of strength completely, it will either be removed from play entirely or returned to the player's draw pool. This will depend on which block it actually is, and I won't get into the details of all that. The rulebook is available as a download on the publisher's website if you'd like to learn more about that aspect of the game. What I will touch on now are the 2 options a player may have during battles: treachery rolls and air charges. But in order to understand why you would want to use these 2 options, I'll have to first touch on the winning conditions of the game. There are 2 ways a player can win a game of Richard III. Either kill all their opponent's heirs to the throne, which each side have 5 heirs, or at the end of the 3rd campaign, the player who is king will be the winner. How do you get to be crowned king? Well, through having control of the majority of heirs and nobles on the board at the end of a campaign. The Lancastrian player's senior heir block on the board will start out as the king, and the York player's senior heir block is known as the Pretender. The Pretender will be the block that becomes king if their side takes the throne. So with that said, we'll return back to the air charges. The player's air blocks may have an option during battle to do what's called an air charge, and this means an heir in a battle can designate all of his attacks to go toward a single enemy block of his choosing. Now this is different because usually the damage would be allocated to an enemy block with the most strength. So an air charge may come in handy when a loyal enemy noble is present in a battle, because you'll want to try and destroy them as soon as possible, because loyal enemy nobles when killed are removed from the game entirely. So if you kill them, you increase your chances of becoming king. Loyal enemy nobles have a rose in the top left corner of the block. Loyal noble blocks are not subject to treachery rolls. Killing them is how you're going to get rid of them. I'll now touch base on the treachery rolls. This is an option available to only 3 blocks in the game, 2 of which are the king and the pretender. Some nobles in Richard III are not all that reliable on the field, and they may defect to the other player's side as a result of a treachery roll. The nobles that can defect are those that are not loyal, so the ones without a rose printed on them. Instead of attacking the enemy in the normal fashion, the king or the pretender can attempt a treachery roll to try and get the enemy nobles to fight for their side. It basically involves a die roll, and you'll be hoping that the die rolled displays an even number. Sometimes, however, you may have to roll more than one die. If the roll or rolls were successful, you swap out the noble blocks. There is 1 noble block for each side that are subject to treachery rolls. Now, I won't get into any more detail than that. I fear that I've probably confused you already, but there is a lot more to the game. Of course, there is the fog of war and the element of surprise that comes from not always knowing where your opponent has blocks situated on the map. Players may also have the opportunity to retreat during battles or maybe add reserves. There are event cards in the game. There are limits after each turn as to how many blocks can remain in areas. Note, for those who have played other Columbia block wargames, I said each turn, not after each campaign, so there is an added pressure not to clump up those blocks in one area. There are quite a few defensive benefits for those blocks protecting their home areas, and a number of other details that I've left out.
This game didn't click with me like both Hammer of the Scots and Julius Caesar did. I feel the flow of this game is quite a bit harder to grasp. For me, at least, it took a few games before I even really knew what I should be setting my sights on and the best use for the treachery rolls and the air charges. There are also quite a lot of icons to become familiar with, and heraldic arms, and it's worth noting that the heraldic arms that you see scattered across the board are not just there for show. They play a significant part in the game in regards to recruits and nobles. So it's a game that required a few plays for me just to kind of get. It has quite a learning curve. And my initial impression was that the game felt a bit cluttered. I mean, there's a variety of different units, which is good, but there are also various rules exceptions in regards to certain nobles, certain heirs, blocks and areas, and it just took a bit of time to absorb all this. Once I got past that, the game seemed to flow quite well. And look, I like Richard III, but to be honest, I'm not a very big fan of the game, because I like playing the House of York a lot more than I like playing the House of Lancaster. A lot more, and I'll explain why. This here is a picture of the game's initial setup. You can see Lancaster are the only ones in England itself. And remember, they're the king to start out. And because of the amount of defensive bonuses they get for occupying some areas, I feel the Lancastrians are very much encouraged to dig in and play a very defensive game from the start. A lot of recruiting each campaign, maybe with a bit of movement here and there to help with recruits, but their strategies, in my experience, seem to be based around defense and recruits, and maybe only initiating an attack when an opportunity presents itself that's just far too good to pass up. And as a result of this, I'm not really a fan of playing the House of Lancaster because I find that a bit dull. Now, Lancaster, of course, don't have to play to that strategy, but I really think it's their best option if they do, if they want to remain king. And look, some people may even like their role in the game, but personally I don't. As for York, well, that's a different story. They're quite the opposite. Attacking, moving, using the seas, taking over areas, recruiting, good fun. But Lancaster, in my opinion, not so much fun to play at all. Now, because of the restrictions each turn on how many blocks can remain in an area, and because of the limitations in regards to crossing to some adjacent areas, movement in this game feels tight, and battles in the game will often have reserves, and voluntary retreats will be common too. So movement plays a big part in this game, and you're really trying to aim to limit your opponent's options if they choose to retreat. And it can generally take a few times to eliminate an enemy noble if they're actively trying to avoid you. And I like that hunt in this game, as well as everything else that I've come to like about this system, the battle system and the fog of war, for example. But all in all, I have to say that Richard III is probably not all that likely to come off my shelf often, because if I personally want my Columbia block game fix, I find it too hard to look past Julius Caesar and Hammer of the Scots. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all again soon.